Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Stoli Doli Scaries.
I'm your host, John Ritchie Jr.
And I'm Kyryn. And today we have the most special witchy episode because we are watching The Craft.
Welcome to the witching hour.
Today's cocktail is going to be the Invoked Spirit. And we're going to take a sip anytime they mention Menon. I have a really hard time. Menon.
Manon.
I'll be honest. Watching this, it always really makes me want to practice witchcraft. But I I like looked into buying the candles and doing this, but like I really think they have something here. I mean, I think they went really dark with it. But it's just such a fun 90s movie.
Can we briefly talk about the text thread that we have coming up to this episode, which was basically like, I feel like somebody's doing witchcraft on me. Honestly, I set up for this, and this is what happened. I'm not lying. Look, live candles. I was like,
no joke.
We're invoking the spirit.
Mm-hmm.
So I will properly blow these candles out very soon because I'm petrified.
Yeah, I'm really just counting on you. I really do. I just want you to let me know if you see something, look suspicious. Then
see something, say something.
Do something. Yeah. So The Craft was released in theaters May 3rd, 1996. It was directed by Andrew Fleming, starring Miss Fairuza Balk, Robin Tunney, Rachel True, and Miss Neve Campbell, the Scream Queen herself.
Love it.
Mm-hmm.
This movie pretty much starts off with our three iconic girlies doing some witchy stuff. We're at the table, we're looking at them doing some spells and chanting.
Now is the time, this is the hour, ours is the magic, ours is the power. Let's say it together, ready? Now is the time, this is the hour. I'm just kidding, it's a tongue twister.
It's difficult. And I'm scared right now to do anything with these fucking flames behind me. I thought it was really cool. And then obviously we get kind of like thrusted into the clouds. There's some rock music playing, which is a song by the Beatles, Tomorrow Never Knows.
So it's actually, they couldn't afford the Beatles. So it's by Our Lady Peace, but it's a cover of the Beatles song, which is the second. There's another song in the movie it's originally by the Smiths that they had to get somebody to do a cover of because it was such a teeny little budget. Like they couldn't afford the Beatles.
So fuck me. It wasn't the Beatles. And that song though is called Tomorrow Never Knows.
Mm-hmm.
It's a great bop. Honestly, yeah. I haven't heard Our Lady Peace mentioned in probably 20 years.
I've never heard them mentioned. Do you know
that they had a couple singles when I was 13. It was.
I've never heard of them in my life.
So we basically just see in the beginning like a family on a plane entering Los Angeles, and it's raining. They catch a cab from the airport. Seems like, well, later we find out like stepmom, father, and daughter enter this house, which appears to be a little bit old, and it's leaking everywhere. There's leaks. It's raining outside, but it's also raining inside. And we meet Sarah, played by Robin Tunney, and she is in her new room and puts a picture up of a woman in a black and white frame. She goes back downstairs to get more things and then is startled by a man who appears to be houseless in the front doorway.
Never heard anybody say homeless.
It's the new terminology.
It's kinder? Is that like a kinder way?
Yeah.
Like,
it's
home means something like warmth, and so okay. He is very houseless. He's very scary. says,
He is scary. He just looks disheveled, and we don't even need to say he looks like a bum. Um, he just is dirty and feels like he doesn't belong there. And he is in the front doorway, and he's holding a snake, uh, and casually says, "I found this out back. You want it?" It's definitely a startling beginning scene where you're just like, okay, we're at the airport, we're going to this house now, and then all of a sudden there's a man in the doorway.
yeah,
So Sarah screams, and he says, "Relax, what's the matter with you?" And she calls her father down. She's screaming for him. He comes down the stairs, picks up a weapon of some kind. I feel like it's like one of those fire pokers
yeah.
thing.
Hmm.
Picks up this weapon, this fire poker, and shoos him out of the front doorway, saying, "Get out of here!" And he asks Sarah if she is okay, and she says she's fine. And then he notices it's a snake on the ground by his feet, and he kind of kills it off screen.
And she's really like kind of casual about it. So I was like, can you imagine if something like that happened to you? He's like, are you all right? She's like, yeah, he just surprised me. I bet he did. He did surprise you. She has nerves of steel. I would have pooped my pants if somebody did that. It's crazy.
Kind of scary, but either way, this feels like a bad omen. This is like, we know something's up. Okay, so then we cut to a Catholic school where Sarah is just starting. Um, we don't know this yet, but they moved from San Francisco to LA. So she's the new girl in town. You know, we get our three main witches: Feruza, Rachel True, and Nev Campbell, who play Nancy, Rochelle, and Bonnie, iconically walking down the hallways of their high school, which, by the way, none of them were teenagers at this time. And we see, as they're walking down the hallway, we see the three pinhead jokesters, Chris, Mitt, and Trey, played by Skeet Ulrich, Brecken Meyer, and Nathaniel Marston, something like that. Brecken is actually in Clueless, which harkens back, and he's really playing the same character or a similar.
No, I like in Clueless he plays like
In Clueless,
Travis, which is like this like kind of stoner like silly guy. And I hated him as the bully. It didn't make any kind of sense. That guy
you
is not a
know,
bully. I would have stomped on him in high school. He's a little pipsqueak. That would never ever ever fly. No way. I did not like him as the bully.
no way,
I
Jose.
do have a fun fact. So the high school that they're shooting at is called, I think it's called Verduga Hills High School, but they shot a lot of like famous movies there. They shot Better Off Dead, 90210, My So-Called Life, and Heathers, which is important only because Rachel True, when she was auditioning for this film, she said, or maybe not auditioning, I think it was before she even got this audition, but she said it was always her dream to star in like a cult classic like Heathers, something that would be like remembered for years to come. And then she shot a cult classic in the same high school that Heathers was shot. I was like, wow.
So we see our three boneheads, and as the girls are walking down the hallway, they jokingly try to cover their eyes from the witchy girls who walk by as Nancy kind of stares them down in the hallway. The three, we'll call them witches, gather by Nancy's locker, and Bonnie states that the almanac says that today is going to be an arrival of something. I love how Nancy interjects and says, "Yeah, I'm getting my rag."
I do wish we would bring back calling it a rag. I haven't heard
And
that in a minute. And also, who the fuck's reading an almanac? Never in my life. Bonnie. Wow.
Bonnie continues to say, "A new wholeness within, a new balance. Earth, air, water, fire. Maybe it's our fourth." So now we're getting a little bit of like, these girls are looking, well, at least Bonnie, maybe. Bonnie seems the most interested in like um, reading the signs, waiting for something to happen. You know, I love how Nancy, I mean, they're at their locker and she's just She has like a hanging rope, like a noose
A
in her locker,
noose. She's got a black noose in her locker.
holding on
Yeah.
to.
Yeah.
Um, it's kitschy and cute, and I like it. Nancy says, "We don't need a fourth." And Bonnie says that they need someone to call all the corners, so north, south, east, and west. Um, we then enter French class, where the teacher is speaking entirely in French and asks Dimwit Mitt a question. Who is this guy who from Clueless? So he struggles to respond uh, in French or even understand the question, and he finally says, "Oh, you mean did I get laid?" Um, which who says that in high school to a teacher? New girl Sarah says something under her breath in French, and the teacher notices her being able to respond, and they start a conversation with each other. Meanwhile, Mitt says, "What is that snail trail saying about me?"
So clever. How clever.
Wow.
Honestly, I kind of wanted to steal it. Though. I've never heard anybody say that before.
Snail trail feels
Snail
like
trail.
a reference to the morning after or the walk of shame,
Oh, I didn't put that together. Oh, that's
which
filthy.
maybe it is.
I definitely didn't get
Um,
that.
I'll use that.
Breckenmeyer.
I use that
Whoa.
with my community.
Mm.
Snail trail
Well,
over.
you're constantly educating us. I had no idea. Mm-hmm.
Um, Bonnie, who is also in the class, Nev Campbell, starts to notice Sarah, who then starts to hold a pencil to her desk and tries to kind of stand it up straight. And while Dumbo tries to argue with the teacher, Sarah manages to get the pencil to stand upright and starts to spin it around hands free. Um, and when Sarah hears Bonnie's gasp, she loses her concentration and the pencil falls to the floor. Bonnie, in the next class, rejoins her fellow witches, what seems like next period, and quietly says, "She's here." Bonnie lets them know that she is convinced that Sarah is the fourth and that she's the one. So Nancy asks if Bonnie is feeling okay because this sounds bonkers, which kind of shows just how much maybe Nancy doesn't believe, or maybe that's just her personality, that she's just like,
It's
what do
super
you.
debatable because a part of me, like my interpretation of her being like, we don't need a fourth, whatever. Like I think she just desperately wants to remain kingpin because it's so
Mhm,
obviously that she is the kingpin that they look to
mhm.
her.
Yes, I agree. Um, Sarah walks over to the girls because she's new and asks if she can sit with them because she's supposed to find a lab group. And they just stare at her, pretty much. And as Sarah starts to walk away, Bonnie finally says, "No, it's okay, you can sit here," but she has already left the space.
Well, she says it so quietly too. Like,
No, you can sit here.
it's like the weirdest. Like it's weird, and sad. Bonnie does seem like absolutely the kindest of them. Nancy's obviously like the badass kind of evil one. Rochelle is kind of neutral, and Bonnie's like just has like an innocent kindness about her. And so if anyone's gonna try to reach out, it's gonna be Bonnie for sure.
Um, and then Bonnie says, like, "Are you happy that like she didn't sit with us?" And then we can kind of tell Nancy's not impressed um,
Well, but
with
too,
this.
she didn't say like we have our fourth. There she is, and point at her. So they don't know that that's the fourth. I mean, even though like they still shouldn't have been a dick to a stranger, but they didn't know that that's who she was talking about. So you get a pass.
Okay, so we're going along with our school day, and we see Sarah sitting by herself outside. I'm guessing it's lunchtime. She's got a book on her table when Mr. Chris sits beside her. You know, I didn't even realize that this fucker had a picked flower in his hand. Like just a
I
little.
didn't either. I didn't either until I was watching and taking notes. I was like, wow, he really came to the table with some shit. All right.
Yeah, he's looking for something, all right. He
Mm.
says, "You're Sarah, right?" And then starts to apologize for the way that his dumb friends acted in French class. He says, "They're assholes." And she responds cleverly with, "You know what they say, you are who you hang out with." And he
Which is
doesn't
true.
quite get it at first until he says, "Wait a minute, did you call me an asshole?" And she apologizes and says that her defenses are up and people here have been really rude to her. And he asks who, and she says, "These three girls that are behind you." And she tells him not to stare, but he does one of the old stretching gags. It's the old, oh,
Hmm.
looks over. And I love the way that they're just like posed up against the
Like,
wall.
and they're deadpan staring at her too. Nancy's smoking a cig. They're not even trying to hide it. They're straight like locked in on her.
Yeah.
Hmm.
These witches are posed perfectly under a painting of what appears to be Mother Mary. Uh, he says, "Shit. It's the bitches of Eastwick."
So clever.
Clever.
So
So stupid.
clever.
Har, 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 skeet. Um, he tells her to stay away from them, and she asks why, and he continues to say, "You see the one on the right? She's a major slut. I don't know from experience or anything." This
Oh,
is the problem. This is
yeah,
the
you
problem.
fucking do. Don't know from experience. Yeah, okay. Methinks the man does protest too much. Hmm?
And
Mm.
even the next line, I feel like, and he says, "The one in the middle, she's got these burn scars all over her body. I haven't seen them, but friends of mine have." You're like, dude, you are just telling some tales. And I think, like, yes, they are all staring intently. All the witches are staring at Sarah and Chris talking, but Nancy's really the only one out of them all that's like intently staring at them.
She's
Um,
always intensely staring. Like she has just the most intense gaze of anybody ever. And I don't know if maybe it's the eyeliner that is just like makes it seem like so piercing, but she is when she looks, you
yes,
know?
piercing.
Ain't no mistaking it.
He says, "Anyway, they're, nah, never mind." And she inquires, and he says, "They're witches." And
I mean, I think
Nancy,
that was pretty much a given when you said bitches of Eastwick, dumb fuck. But
but I think
sure.
it's really the first time that we're hearing like, no, like someone part of their school actually believes that they're witches.
I do have a fun fact
Oh
about
yeah.
Chris. So Skeet Ulrich plays Chris, and it was actually the hardest character for them to cast. It was the last character they cast. And Robin Tunney knew Skeet Ulrich from New York City. And she was like, "You really got to audition him. You really got to, get him out here." So they flew him out. He auditioned at, I think, the director's house, and they hired him on the spot. But famously, he really hates himself in this role. He thinks he was just too green. He can't watch it. He like cringes when anybody brings it up. And you know what though? I really have only ever seen him in this and Scream. And he's so good in Scream. He's like my biggest crush like ever in Scream. But he's definitely like younger. But I don't know if he's necessarily green. You hate him in this film. He does a good job there. You fucking hate him.
Well, it is a shitty character to play, but we'll see what
High
happens.
school. Yeah.
Um, Chris diverts the conversation to what Sarah's doing after school, and she casually says, "I don't know, nothing, I guess." And we can tell he's kind of eager to start something with her, and she's somewhat flirting in the conversation, but he forthright says, "I'm busy, football practice."
But
Uh,
see, and I
He's
already
on the
fucking
watch.
hate him. He pulled a like bait and switch on her, asked her what she was doing, like he was gonna ask her out, so she admitted she had nothing to do, and then said, "Well, I'm busy at football practice." You much. You terrible person. I can already tell you're gonna be that flower is fooling nobody. I can
Mm-mm,
already tell.
mm-mm.
Mm-mm. Uh-uh.
Either way, she's not so thrilled when she says, football practice. That is so tempting.
But she's
Um,
flirty about it. Like she does have a good comeback that she's not like, "Oh, okay." Like she's like flirty and sarcastic back, but you can tell she likes this dude. She likes him. He's got her with his little stupid flower like that.
He gets up and walks away to the wonderful song we talked about earlier, uh, performed by Love Spit Love.
This whole soundtrack is like fucking awesome. It's so 90s grunge.
Yeah. It's like We Thought We Loved I Know What You Did Last Summer soundtrack. And this one
is like, I'm here and here, this is such a good soundtrack. I almost bought it. Because it's one of the ones, you can't get all of the songs on Spotify or Apple. You got to buy the whole soundtrack to get the full experience. But it's a good one.
Let me just get my studded belt out and all my black clothes.
Yeah.
Rock
I was
out.
gonna say, I know you remember that time very well. That was a deep phase for Johnny Rich.
Glorious. It was a glory. Those were the glory days.
They were.
Sarah walks over to the football field, watches for a little bit behind the fence, when Nancy from the side says, "Sarah, looking for someone?" And our three baddies walk up to her. She says, "Oh, no, no, no." And Bonnie goes, "Some of these football dicks make their girlfriends come and watch them practice, as if it's interesting." And I think there's some interesting banter here. Rochelle mentions to Sarah that, Nancy is sorry about what happened in biology class and lets her know that she's mean to everyone, so don't take it personally.
But I love that Nancy doesn't even speak for herself. This is our first. Nancy runs this group. She's not even apologizing for herself, to the point where Sarah's like, "Are you Nancy?" And she's like, "No, she's Nancy. She don't apologize for herself. She just deadpan stares at you with her dark, dark eyeliner eyes."
Honestly, though, what I can say is that I feel like all of these actresses are having spot-on performances. Like, the
Especially Fairuza
complexity.
Balk. She just she is Nancy. Like, she is so good in this role. Oh, it's so impressive. Like, she is the character.
Sarah says, "You're Nancy?" And she's kind of looking at Bonnie, and then Nancy holds up her cigarette hand. And Bonnie replies, "No, this is Nancy, I'm Bonnie, and that's Rochelle." So we get a meet and greet, and she says, "Hi, I'm Sarah." And then before she can get it out, Bonnie says, "Yeah, we know who you are." So Nancy cutely says, "Do you want to go for a coffee?" And I think it's funny because we haven't got this before, but I think she's starting to come around to the idea that, like, maybe this girl is special and I kind of want to court her.
Right.
And she says, Sarah says, like, "No, I can't. I got to go home. My dad's waiting for me." And cool girl Nancy starts to laugh, first of all, and then says, "You can make something up. I mean, Rochelle's ditching practice."
Yeah. Yeah. She kind of
To
like
be in high
laughs at
school
her.
again, right? "What are you doing?" "Yeah, we're ditching. We're going to the diner." That's where I went. Smoking cigs at the diner.
I never ditched class. I didn't really have any friends. I'm gonna cut that out. I definitely didn't have any friends.
You absolutely
Definitely
had
not.
fucking friends. You were just like
No, I was such a loser in high school. I really was. I desperately wished I could have had like a little group like this. And Nancy's wearing like the coolest like vinyl black like jacket. I did read, so the director Andrew Fleming, when he like pitched it to, I don't know who, I think it was Warner Brothers, whoever he pitched it to, he said, "I want it to feel like all of the girls are in The Cure." Like, that was his inspiration. And I feel like nailed it. I mean, especially with Nancy, that
Yeah.
vinyl jacket.
But either way, I'm in my Catholic school boy outfit.
I was gonna
Or
say,
something
did you
like
guys
it.
wear uniforms? Because you went to no?
Yeah. I went to Catholic school up until 8th grade, and it was treacherous. But yeah, we had uniforms. So she looks over and Nancy says, they're talking about Chris's, Chris at this point, and Nancy says he comes on to anything with tits, Sarah. And Bonnie says, except for me. So Sarah clarifies that she's not watching Mr. Chris, and Nancy, kind of remarks and said, he spreads disease. I speak from personal experience. But the next line I thought was hilarious when she yells at Chris from the sidelines. And she's just like, yeah, Chris, go long, go for the pass, baby. And then he fucking fumbles over his feet in the field. It's hilarious.
She's so surprising, like, because she's such a like dark presence. And so you're right, like when she was like, want to go for coffee? Or when she does that, it's like, what? Like she's you never know what this lady's gonna do. And yeah, that was so out of character for her. And so yeah, when she does it, it's like, what? Hee hee.
And then the girls, say, you're coming, right? Like, we're going shopping or whatever. Sarah says, I don't have any money. And Nancy says, we get a 5-finger discount.
You know what I'm saying?
You know what I'm saying? On their way to go shopping, right? This is where the iconic looks are coming, right? The walk scenes are lovely. They're delicious in this like schoolgirl uniforms, but that are just bad to the bone. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Oh
like
yeah.
Black and white, edgy boots. It feels like, Rochelle's wearing this like sort of like nunnery buttoned up thing, but it's like cut off like low and it's hot. All of it's hot. And they kind of talking with Sarah, asking her about why she moved here. And then Nancy finally asks Sarah what the watch on her hand is for, and she gives in a little bit and says that she slit her wrists, which is sad to talk about, and also trigger warning for anyone, talking about this sort of thing. But I think that Nancy in this response too is just another piece of like, she says that she's sorry for asking her about it.
Which is weird because, so for me, when she was like, what's up with that? And she pointed out her wrist, I thought she was just straight up asking her about her scars. And like, girl, you know what's up with this. Who the fuck wouldn't know what that, And so then when she's like very sheepishly is like, sorry. I'm like, girl, you knew what that was about. Like, who wouldn't know what that was about?
It makes a little more sense because I think when they cut to and you see the scar, like her watch is on.
Yeah. Oh, like her spot. Yeah.
I thought she was talking about that, but
maybe she was. That would be kinder for her if that's the case, because if she was just like, hey, what's up with them scars on your wrists?
Yeah.
It would be a little bit more like, so maybe it was the watch, but either way, it was kind of weird.
Yeah. I think if anything, if it was a true I'm sorry, I still feel like it's malicious in intention, because
everything Nancy does, I think there are very few moments where what she does is not self-serving and malicious intention. She's always looking out for number one.
So I think Nancy's response is such, and I think that Bonnie's response is even more wild.
Wow, you even did it the right way.
Yeah. Well, first she's like, oh, what'd you do it with? And she's like, a kitchen knife.
Oh, yeah, maybe that's what it is. Yeah. I see. I didn't get all I remember is Bonnie saying, we even did it the right way. And then Nancy saying, punk rock. And I was like, this is like the most like high school like interaction of the whole movie. Like, I feel like the rest of the movie, they seem very grown up almost. And this is a moment that is so like adolescent, and like everything about it, like everybody's reactions.
I honestly think it's another, Nancyism, where she's trying to make her feel comfortable and that it's not that big of a deal. Like, we've all been through shit.
Right.
And so we've all dealt with some stuff, and, we want to continue doing bad things. But also, you're one of us. That's fucking cool. That's punk rock. So in the next scene, they enter the, what I'm going to call either the witch store or the apothecary or whatever you want to call it.
here. Being like
What do
a
they call
cult
that these days?
store, the potion store.
The
Yeah.
potion store.
Potions.
And
Hmm.
they're taking a casual look around, and then Bonnie is close to Sarah, looking at a book, and she tells Sarah to put it in her bag, and Sarah declines, but um, she goes on some tangent about how like big animals steal from little animals.
And this is where I said like Sarah really like has some balls, and Bonnie is like, "Hey, put this in your purse," and she's like, "No, like no, I'm not going to do that." And Bonnie tries to defend it, and Sarah's still like, "No, not going to do it." And good for her, just tough.
Sticking
Yeah.
in strong. So they start walking around more, and it's turning night at this point.
And they're in a
And
very like obviously dark part of LA. It's like very shady,
yes,
Shadyville. Yeah.
Shadyville. We see some folks who are, begging her for money. And then on the street, we see the guy who showed up at the house from before. And he says, "Hey, I know you. I got a snake for you. Wait a second. I have to talk to you. I had a dream about you." And Sarah's frantically running away.
Which
And
again, good for her because I'd be like, really? What happened in this dream? Like, I would have had a lot of follow up questions for this man, and good on her for being like, no, you're crazy.
right.
No. But I've been like, really? Did you?
And then he kind of calls out and he says, "In my dream, you were dead. I'm talking to you. Don't you run away from me." She runs across the street. Um, he says, "I know what I'm talking about. I'm in touch with Manon." And the three girls all look towards him as he is also trying to cross the street after Sarah. And all our three witches are directly looking at him, but then Sarah, towards the end, is also sort of the fourth to look towards him. And then
Mhm.
Homeboy gets run over by a
Like,
car.
head run over. Like, he is run over.
Okay,
Like,
let me just say, his head does get run over, but these effects, not it.
I was gonna say, like, his head, like, they literally show his head going under the wheel, and then they show him just kind of like with a.
It's bad. It's real bad.
It's not great. It's not great, but hey, we get the picture. He didn't make it.
So Bonnie goes up to Sarah after this guy gets run over, and like people are checking on him, and she's like, "We got to get out of here." So they all run towards their little sort of like setup in the trees, and they are so excited to talk about what just happened. All three of them are just like, uh
Over the moon.
yeah,
Like, which is a bit of a red flag. A
yeah.
little
I
bit.
mean, somebody just got run over, and they're like, "Oh my god, did you see what just happened? Oh my god, that's crazy!" Uh,
They see that as like a sign. Like, we just killed a man. We were all looking at him at the same time. We were all thinking the same thing. And I think they even asked her, they're like, were you thinking it? Were you thinking like, oh, I want And she's like, yeah, I was. And they're like, well, that's it. Rochelle is like, well, maybe Minot will Minon? Minon. I fucking don't like this. I hate that they made his name so goddamn difficult. Minon? Minon. That's what I'm gonna say. So maybe
do it.
Rochelle's like, maybe Minot will finally listen.
Sarah's like, what do you worship the devil? Nancy's like, no, it's like God and the devil. I mean, it's everything. It's the trees, it's the ground, it's the earth, the moon, it's everything. And then she does make a reference and say, like, if the God and devil were playing football, Manon would be the stadium that they played in, or the sun that shone down upon them. And Bonnie says, like, does this stuff happen to you a lot? Because she's trying to understand Sarah's like
Gift. Yeah.
power, sort
Yeah.
of. Sarah says,
Like this like stuff like this has happened to her before, but it always gets messed up. Like she'll like
yes.
really, really want it to rain and she'll think about it and think about it, and then like a pipe will burst in her room. And so it never works out the way that she wants it to.
Nancy kind of doesn't believe her. She's like, yeah, right. Like, you can't do that, sort of thing.
Yeah.
Um, but she does say, if you can do that, have you ever heard of invoking the spirit? So Sarah says no. and she's kind of confused. And Nancy said it's when you call him Manon. It's like you take him into you. It's like he fills you. He takes everything that's going wrong in your life and makes it all better again.
A lot of sexual innuendos here.
It's like you take him into you. It's like he fills you.
Dirty. It sounds dirty.
You know, the way I saw this is kind of like Whoopi Goldberg in Ghost, where the guy like goes into her, which I know
That's a much more innocent version. I don't know. Every time they talk about this, I'm like,
Sarah makes a comment that says, you know,
because
nothing.
Nancy says something like, did she say that she says like he fills you up and he makes everything all better.
Yeah.
Like everything is fixed.
And Sarah says nothing makes everything all better again.
And again, Sarah like standing her ground. I wish I had that type of like fortitude. I don't know if that's the right word, but like she just is tough. Like, you know, she doesn't care about
That's
pitting
also
men.
a part of her character's arc too, you know, because we
Mhm.
don't really know the backstory, but I also think
Right.
it's, you know, nothing really makes everything better because maybe she's tried, you know,
Right.
all different ways, you know, especially with what we find out.
Yeah.
And then Nancy says, well, maybe it's not for you. And Sarah gets up and starts to leave, and she says, like, you guys are freaking me out. She's kind of scared, and she walks away, and the other girls are like, Nancy, we need her. Like, and casual Nancy is just like, yeah, like a hole in the head.
One of many, many good quotes from Nancy. She's
Well,
such a dick in this scene. Oh, she's scared. She's scared. And again, she scares me so much. Nancy's character's so scared. I would never want to cross her. So again, for Sarah to have the ground to like stand up to her and be like, I'm fucking out of here. Y'all are weird is really special. And I have so much respect for her. You know? Ain't easy.
it ain't easy being sleazy. You know what I'm saying? And then we get Sarah in the next scene starting to hang out with old Chris. And they're so cool. They're on top of the buildings. And they're talking sort of negatively about people and drinking a brewski, you know? I think these stupid lines, you know, any boys trying to say, like, you have a good head.
Well,
It's
that's
great
the
for
thing, like,
kissing. The fuck?
stupid.
I'm gonna start using that. I'm
Like,
gonna go out on a date and I'm gonna say, you know what, you have a really good head. He's gonna say, it's gonna go real. I was about to say it's gonna go real south, and it
which
might.
would even further tumble into the joke. I did write that. I was like, this is just such a high school interaction, and I was so like not scarred. What's the word when you're like flashback to like laughing at a guy you think is cute, stupid. Like he wasn't even being funny. Like her head's big, you know. Her head's big. What? And like they have this like really stupid interaction, and I'm like, my God, I'd rather be alone for the rest of my life than have to like have a conversation like that where you're like, you know, trying to make a guy think he's funny and like they're clearly not getting to know one another whatsoever. And it's just like, it's very high school. And it's just like, oh
Blinded.
God, fucking awful.
She's blinded by the features of Skeet Ulrich.
Who the fuck is? And he is so good looking. I will say that. But I do think, God, his personality, you know, what's that now?
Maybe not my type, but you know,
What about in Scream? You don't think he's a babe in Scream? The ultimate bad boy, Billy Loomis? Oh, I think he's so handsome in Scream.
you know, if we're gonna just dive into Scream a little bit, I had more of a crush on Matthew Lillard.
Really?
I did. everybody goes after the main guy, or like,
well, but
everybody was into like Justin Timberlake and NSYNC, or whoever the main guy was in the
I always
Backstreet
like
Boys.
Lance, which is so telling.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, honestly, Mr. Fatone, way better, way better. A little scruffy. I mean, Justin's hot, but what about JC? You know. So anyway, we're back on the rooftop.
Mm-hmm. Yes, they're
His
having a secret
friends leave.
conversation.
They're pairing off. Other friends going home with the girly. And he offers Sarah to go back to his place because no one's there.
He doesn't even offer. He's like, let's go back to my place. Like, it's a statement, which skeet. And Sarah's like, I don't want to go. She literally says, I don't want to go. And then she quick is like, I got to get home. But she says like, no, which snaps for this girl. Snaps. Constant respect.
Honestly, her even asking like, are you mad? And the way in which he says, no, I'm not mad. Unbelievable. And when I say that, I mean, it's not believable.
Not at all. You know what, though? I kind of believed him when she's like, are you mad? He's like, no, I'm not. It's okay. I think he even offers to drive her home, maybe. Like, he seems disappointed. He seems disappointed, but he doesn't seem pissed. Not enough to do the shit that guy does.
When will these boys learn?
Never.
Boys
are trash.
We're just going to continuously talk about the tropes of these fuckers in horror movie where they're always trying to get the sex on. Something bad always happens.
Always.
Moral of the story.
Mm-hmm.
She even says she's sorry. He appears to be okay with it until the next day at school. Sarah's in bio. Her girlies come up to her and ask her how the hot date went last night, and let her in on the fact that Mr. Chris has been telling the whole school that they had sex. He's been saying that she's the lousiest lay that he's ever had, and from him, that's pretty bad.
Motherfucker. The scene is upsetting for several reasons. Fucking Chris Hooker. What a scumbag. But also, when they come up to her, Nancy says, like, I told you he was a jerk. And Rochelle said, he said the same thing about Nancy.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I think Chris Hooker has just done a lot of damage to a lot of ladies. And, my favorite quote from Mr. Tony Robbins is, rejection breeds obsession. And it's so true. When somebody rejects you, you just become obsessed with impressing them and getting them back. Have you seen the Netflix special? Tony Robbins?
Nope.
Changed my life. It's so good. But one of the people in the audience, like, they were so upset because their dad, or something with their dad, and they just couldn't get over it. And he said that line, rejection breeds obsession. I was like, that literally explains my entire dating life. Because I only really care about men when they reject me. And then it becomes like an obsession of like, what is it? Why? And I must get them. It's like a game. And so I think for everybody, I think for Sarah, as we see later on when she does the love spell on Chris, and I think for Nancy, I think everybody, especially at that age, high school is such a trash time when you don't even know what the fuck is what. And so I think Chris Hooker is such a prick, and I think he just has a ton of, I hate men like that. I've known so many men like that, and it's just like, I think he really did a number on these ladies, really fucked with their psyche. And so I think even like, that's why I said, I think even like Nancy is still like hung up on him.
I love when we both see something, like a scene differently. Because I'm like, oh my God, I never thought about that. But interesting take,
Yeah.
In this next scene, Sarah goes up to Chris in the hallway, and he's at his locker, him and the boys in the hallway, and she confronts him. She looks at him and says, hey, can I talk to you for a sec? And good old Mitt steps in as his secretary and says, "I'm sorry, Chris isn't here right now." Something like that. "Can I take a message?" As he turns away from her, and she like stares at him directly and says, "Why did you lie?" And he grabs her hand. This is the part where he shows exactly who he really is. And he says, "Look, I don't want to go out with you again. Please stop begging. It's pathetic."
I want fire to shoot out of
And
my eyes in this scene. This is the most upsetting. And for her to have the balls to go up to him and confront him about it is just like, I have such respect for her, because you know what I would have done? I would have went around and said, yeah, we did have sex. He had a teeny penis and there's not a lot I could do with it. And I would have taken the coward's route 1000%. I would have taken the coward's route, but she didn't. She took the high ground and she went to him and said, "Why the fuck did you do that?" Which was such an adult baller move. And for him to do that, he is such a piece of trash in this movie. I hate him in this movie.
That
It's
was
so
rough.
personally upsetting, but I have so much respect for her doing that. That was not easy. That little Breckenmeyer coming in. He's busy. Oof. Awful.
Stupid ass fuckers. But also, I felt like her comeback could have been a little harder, if I'm being honest.
Well, she
Hey,
was
Chris,
crying. She
fuck
was
you.
crying. Oh, very sad scene, because I feel for her in this moment. Men are trash. It's very, very dark. It's very bleak.
Yeah. I mean, then it's just negated, because once she says that, what does he says? Nah. And then his friend is like, "But I will." And then Mr. Clueless says, "She's gonna cry, then I'm gonna cry, then we're all gonna cry." Fucking goons. So, then we get to Rochelle at diving practice, and she is standing on the diving board, when whispers from Miss Laura and her friend are coming
Laura
from
Lizzie.
Laura
Which I didn't
Liz-
realize that was her name. Laura Lizzie.
Ms. Laura Lizzie, and
Mhm.
she is whispering with her friend, like, "Oh my god, watch watch what I'm gonna do. Watch what's gonna happen." Blah, blah, blah. Rochelle takes a step and goes to dive, and then Laura yells "shark" and sort of breaks Rochelle's concentration, and she lands on her back in the water, which looked very painful. And then she comes up to the surface and they're just clapping for her. It's like really depressing, mean girl shit.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Like, why would you do this to anyone? It's messed up. And then in the locker, I want to call it a locker room, but I guess it's just like, the girls' room. Laura, man, just goes off and is talking to her friend, and she says, "Ugh, look what I just found, a pubic hair in my brush." And then she looks at it and she says, "Oh, wait, that's just one of Rochelle's little nappy hairs." Fucked
Dark.
up.
Very, very.
Like, mean girl beyond mean girl messed up.
Yeah.
I literally wrote, "Oh my god." And then Rochelle confronts her and says, "Why are you doing this to me, Lara? Do you think you're funny?" And
again, she's another one that has some balls. Is not just gonna take it. Like, she's like, "What the fuck is your problem?" Which God, I have so much respect for these people.
yeah,
I would never have done that. Not in high school. Not now.
No.
Never confront a bully. So, God, I have so much respect for her.
And Lara says, "You really want to know why?" And she basically says that she doesn't like black people, with a terrible racial slur. And I was just like, it's so fucked up. And also, I did read too that, what is her name?
Rachel True.
Rachel True, that after the fact, that they didn't really include her in any of the like press releases or any of the like fanfare stuff, which is really fucking stupid.
I read that too, that this part was originally written for a white girl, and she was
Yeah.
supposed to be bulimic.
Yes.
And they changed it. So Rachel True was actually the first person that they cast, and they changed it for her because they liked her so much, and they just felt like she was so right for the role. So they completely changed the role to include this like racist bullying. But it's just so dark because I read that too, that they cut her out of all the publicity, and they only really included her when the other girls were like, no, we're not doing it without her. They included her in it, but it was just like, it was in the movie and you decided to like to do, like, it was just such a terrible look for the people that were doing the publicity, considering her role in the movie, that they would do such a thing. She had more lines than Nev Campbell. Like, she was a bigger role than Nev Campbell. And so it's just so upsetting. She's one of 4. Like, they are all equal parts of this 4 group. And so
Yeah.
it's very sad
It
that they
is.
thought to exclude her. And when I was listening to, I think it was Page 7's podcast about it, and the reasoning was just that they didn't think a Black audience would be interested in a witchcraft movie. They just didn't think there was an audience for it. So they didn't think there was a reason to include her in the press junkets so it's just like,
Stupid.
absolutely. She's
That's-
a really vital part of this movie. So
Yeah.
mm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Then we get to Bonnie in the surgical center, and we finally get to see sort of the scars that are on her body, and they're trying a new treatment where we just basically see these needles poking into her back. It's kind of graphic, it's kind of interesting, but she wants to, her goal is to get rid of all of her scarring.
Right. And the doctor, she makes it a point to say that it is a very experimental treatment and there's no real results. So we're not sure if it's going to work, and it's experimental. So then we cut to Nancy. She's walking home to her trailer in the rain in her good old vinyl coat. And we walk in, and we kind of immediately realize that she doesn't have a good home life. Like, her mom's an alcoholic, and her dad is kind of abusive / an alcoholic as well. It's clear that, like, she's in a kind of a dark space. So then we cut back to biology class. The girls are hanging, and Nancy turns to Sarah and says, like, hey, we're going on a field trip. You're coming with us. And this is one of my favorite scenes. I love the image of these girls in the back of this bus, and Nancy is like sitting like biker chick with like her like red sunglasses on, and there's like some young girls like looking back at her, and the music is playing. It's just like a terrific image. They get off the bus, and this is a very iconic moment. The bus driver says, you girls watch out for those weirdos. And Nancy turns to him. She tips down her red sunglasses and says, we are the weirdos, mister. Which, so badass. But also, I do think he was talking about like rapists. Like murderers. I don't think he was talking about a couple of teenage outcasts. Perhaps. So they all go into the woods to perform their kind of coven ceremony. They all hold up a knife to each other's throats, one by one, and say, it is better that you should rush upon this blade than to enter this circle with fear in your heart. How do you enter? And each of them says, with perfect love and with perfect trust. And then they give each other like a little smooch. I do think this is a fun time to mention that the filmmakers did hire a Wiccan practitioner as like kind of a set technical advisor, just as far as like giving them advice on the spells. And she actually became like very integral to the entire movie. They did make up Minnow because Pat was very insistent that they not use an existing deity because she felt like it would be really dangerous. And I totally agree. I think it would abso-fucking-lutely. This is just shit that you don't really mess with. So anyway, they are performing this ceremony. This is kind of the first ceremony we get of the coven that they're coming together as four. This is a very important moment. So they do this knife ceremony and they all do their little smoochies. Everything's good. And then they all do like a little dagger to the finger, put their blood in a cup, mix it with red wine, and they all drink it. And as they're drinking it, they say, "I drink of my sisters," and ask. And they each put in their request. And so Rochelle is first, and she performs a spell, and she basically asks for revenge on Laura Lizzie, who has been bullying her. And then we get Sarah. She performs basically a love spell, and she wants Chris to love her. And I'm not going to judge her on it. And she even says, like, I know it's pathetic, and she has a picture of him. And where did she get that picture? She has just a picture of him that she puts in, and she performs a love spell on Chris. Bonnie performs a spell, and she basically requests for beauty. She wants her scars to be taken away.
Beautiful
And then
inside and out.
Inside and out. And Nancy wants power, baby. She requests for all of the power of Manon. She wants to be an all-powerful being. And then she drinks the rest of the cup.
The goblet.
They look up, and there's a million butterflies fluttering above them. And they take this as a sign that Manon. It's going to be really hard. That Manon
Blessed be. Blessed be.
Manon is really listening to them. They're on their way to greatness, baby. They take this as a huge sign, these butterflies. So the next day, it is very clear that Sarah's spell specifically is working out. They're in class, and Chris is looking back at her. Like, all of a sudden, like, it's literally like he was struck by lightning, and all of a sudden he just is, like, looking at her. Like, looking at her and gazing. And they're walking to mass, and in the midst of this, Chris runs up to her and kind of apologizes. Not really. He's like, "Hey, Sarah, you hate me, right?" And she's like, "No." He's like, "Oh, well, because I'm a guy. And when you're a guy, guys expect things of you. And so I said some things that were maybe not true." And she's like, "Well, did you tell everybody that, you're a lying piece of shit?" And he's like, "Well, no, but I will." And she's like, "Okay." And he kind of like follows her into the church like a puppy dog, and it's very overt how much. It's not like a subtle spell. Like, he is all of a sudden obsessed with Sarah.
Yep.
And he follows her into the pew, and he sits next to her, and clueless Travis is like, "Were you Stepford boy?" He like makes fun of him, and it's just like such an overt moment because it's clear that he is under some type of something. So then next scene, they're at Bonnie's. They're having a sleepover, and while they're there, Sarah suggests that they play light as a feather, stiff as a board. They don't really know what it is, and she's like, "So it's when, you gather around a girl and you put your fingers underneath her and you say, light as a feather, stiff as a board, light as a feather, stiff as a board, light as a feather, stiff as a board." And you imagine her like rising up. And so Rochelle gets in the middle, and they all go underneath her, and they do their thing, and they imagine it. And shock of shocks, she lifts up. And the thing I am most struck by in this scene is that when Nancy and like, especially Nancy and Sarah, when they open their eyes, they're like utterly shocked. They're like, did they not feel a human being like rising up underneath their fingers? Like, it is a very, look, here's the thing. I've played this many times, and it's never worked out. And it's so disappointing when it doesn't work out. It's it's almost embarrassing. It is embarrassing. It's embarrassing when it doesn't work out for you. And so if it were to ever work out for me, I would know. It's a very distinct thing. And
But I think if the powers are all around you and you're concentrating on saying a spell and doing whatever and you're closing your eyes, and then it doesn't feel, it feels like they're light as a feather, you know?
maybe you're
Then
right. Maybe you're right. I've never been successful. So maybe it feels like nothing is happening and you have risen someone up, but they are able to rise Rochelle right up. Just like boop.
yeah,
And it's an amazing moment. It's iconic. It's cool beyond.
yeah.
And
I think they're also sort of the same like realization as when they made something happen with the guy getting run over. Like they're also surprised that it's like
yeah.
working.
And then like directly after this, we get like this epic montage to Dangerous Type by Letters to Cleo, and the girls are walking all over the school, and it's like a very different energy that they're exerting, like Miss Confident.
Listen, they know what they can do now, so they are sporting all of the "don't fuck with me" attitude.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Skirts
It's
are
a
short.
very different energy. So the next day at diving practice, Rochelle is going up the diving board, and we look over and we see Laura Lizzie coming out of the pool, and she takes off her swim cap, and her hair is it's gone. It's straight up gone. She takes off this cap, and it's not like a few, errant hairs. It's like clumps. Like her scalp is showing, and it is like red. Like her hair is fucking falling out. We can tell that her spell is working.
Yeah.
And then right after that, we dive into Bonnie. She's at the hospital. They are removing, the garb from what they did to her earlier with the experimental treatment, and they're taking it off. And as they're taking it off, the doctor is like, "Oh my God, it worked. The scars are gone." It's like this giant miracle.
Comes off like dry skin.
Like nothing. So the next day, she doesn't show up for class. And Sarah and Rochelle are talking like, "Oh, I know she had her appointment." And then all of a sudden, boom, she walks in, Miss Confident, like low-cut shirt. "Sorry, my pedicure ran late." And like, she's a different lady.
I mean, if we look at that first scene or first couple scenes where she's wearing that baggy overall, her hair's in her face, she's like a little Ali Sheedy in Breakfast Club, just a tad. And now she is shown up as Molly Ringwald.
So the next scene, all the girls are outside and they're talking about it. They're like laying on the quad, and Sarah's, "You look beautiful. You look great." Everybody, like all three of them, are just like so fucking happy on the quad because everybody's spells are really working out. And in the background, we see Nancy, who is salty as fuck. Like she just looks like menacing, like she is upset, you know. And she walks off, and Sarah's like, "What's wrong with her?" And Rochelle says, "Oh, I think she's upset that her spell's not working. She doesn't want to be white trash anymore." And I told her, like, "You're white," which is a funny joke, but I do think it's important to distinguish, like, her wish was to take in all the power of Manon. Like she didn't wish to not be white trash. She wanted to be all powerful, being Jafar. She wanted this like mega moment for herself. So it wasn't just that she didn't want to be trashed.
Mm-hmm.
So we're back at Nancy's house, and her dad goes to abuse her stepmom,
Mm-hmm.
and Nancy screams and yells at him, "You pig!" She starts a fire behind her. And then the dad has a heart attack.
Yeah.
Poof, dead. He's gone. He dies. Just like that. So the next scene, they are in their trailer. They're talking to an insurance agent after the funeral, clearly. And the insurance agent is kind of dancing around it, but he's like, with an insurance lot this size, I have to ask questions. And the mom is like, what are you talking about? What size? And he's like, well, it's $175,000. And they're like, $175,000? Like, that goes to us? And he's like, yeah. And they're like, oh, and they like lose their mind. They freak out. They act like it's $1 million. And I'm like, I'm really happy for them. But also, you know what? They live in Los Angeles. And that money is going to go bye-bye really fucking quick. But to them, it is a godsend. It might as well be $1 billion. The next scene is the girls, so Bonnie, Rochelle, and Sarah walking to her new, like, fancy high-rise apartment. And one of them asks, like, do you think we killed them? And Sarah is the one that's like, no, we didn't kill him. No, like, it wasn't us. Like, not at all. Which is very positive of her, because I don't know about that. Maybe she's right, maybe she's wrong. So they are walking up to this high rise in their really cool outfits. Sarah's got a beret on. Fun.
And Bonnie notices a guy and says, nice ass. I love it.
So they roll up to Nancy's new apartment, and her mom opens the door in this like fabulous purple ensemble, hair curled, like welcomes them in, and it's like, oh my God, girls, come on in. Look at this new couch. Look at this new couch I got. Look at this. I just walked up to the store owners and I said, you know what? Wrap it up. I want it. And then she's got that, and she literally the entire apartment is just this tiny, fashionable couch and a jukebox full of Connie Francis, which so much respect. And then the girls go back to Nancy's room. And Sarah tells them, you know what? I read this thing about glamoring. I think you guys would be really interested in it. And basically, glamoring is just when you can trick someone into seeing something that's not there. Which, my God, I wish I had that power. That'd be so fucking cool. So she's kind of trying to show them the ropes and show them how to do it. And so at first she shows them like, okay, like, and she lifts it and her eyes turn from green to brown. They're not impressed. They're like, you know, the contacts, that's nothing. She's like, you want something bigger? They're like, yeah, we want something bigger. So she says, this is to feel, this is to be, shape and form it for all to see by the power of 3 times 3. As I will it, so it shall be. And she changes her hair from brown to blonde in this unbelievable magic. You look like the Daenerys. And so,
power of 3 times 3.
So I wish it shall be. And so all of a sudden she has blonde hair, and they're all so motherfucking impressed. The next scene, Sarah is sleeping at home when Chris calls out beyond her window, and she goes outside. It's 3 a.m. She's like,
3 motherfucking a.m. This guy on the side of the building. Romeo and Juliet. Rapunzel.
and Chris calls out to her. She comes outside. She's like, what the fuck are you doing here? And he's like, you know, why didn't you answer my call? And she's like, it's 3 a.m. And her dad comes outside. He's like, what are you doing here? So this is just like a clear indication that her love spell has gone bad. And fun fact, in the Wicca religion, you're never supposed to cast a love spell on an actual human being. You're really just supposed to put your intention out there, like, this is what I am open to, come find me. You're never supposed to take somebody's free will. That is like very much the antithesis of what the religion is supposed to represent. You're never supposed to take somebody's free will. And so, of course, this is going to backfire on her. So then they cut back to, they're in the same magic store that they were in at the beginning of the movie. And Sarah is talking to the owner, and she asks her how to undo a love spell. And the owner says, nah, baby girl, can't do that. You know, you gotta let it run its course. You can't just like stop some shit once you cast it. Like once you cast it, it's over. Basically, you should have thought about it before you did it. I think it's Bonnie says, like, are you ever gonna let us know what's behind that curtain? And Sarah jokes like, oh, is it black magic? And the owner says, true magic is neither white or black. It's both because nature is both. The only good or bad is in the intention of the witch, and intention in the heart of the witch. And whatever you send out comes back to you times 3. And this is very motherfucking important later in the movie. So while they're talking, Nancy is off on her own, and she finds this book entitled The Invocation of the Spirit, and she starts flipping through it. And as she's flipping through it, one of the pictures in the book, which is the storm, comes alive, and her eyes get big, and you know she all of a sudden has a connection with this book, and she brings it up to the register, and she says, you know, I want to buy this book. And the owner says, you want to invoke the spirit, you must be experienced to do this. It's very dangerous. And Nancy says, I'm a big girl. How much is it? And the owner says, $25. And I'm like, yo, how dangerous. You selling this book for $25? This is that day, like, and come to find out how motherfucking dangerous this book is. And she's selling this shit for 25 bones.
And she said already before, she's like, you know, somebody, you got to be experienced to do this. Well, clearly, if you the good witch, you know that this bitch ain't ready. She is not capable with this fucking Minnow, I don't know what his name is. No, and then they're going to the beach to recreate this scene that she saw in the book, lightning and thunder. Fuck.
She ain't ready. And the owner knew that. I think you're right. I think that's why the owner was like, it's very dangerous. Are you sure? Give me $25. I don't really care. I don't enjoy this. I think it's very foreboding. And at the very least, the owner should have charged $50. That's what I think. But
50,000.
very least. But she don't. And so the very next scene is the girls heading to the beach to invoke the spirit. No holds barred. They each are carrying something that represents their sign. So Rochelle is carrying a fish, Bonnie is carrying a butterfly, Sarah a bird, and Nancy motherfucking stink, which, you know, says so much about
What
Nancy.
is that? Water, air, earth, and fire?
Right. They are sitting in a circle, and as they're sitting in a circle, Sarah is kind of confiding in Nancy specifically about when she was cutting her wrists, about how she kept hallucinating these visions of snakes and bugs, and no matter what she did, and no matter how many times she closed her eyes, like she just kept picturing it, and they just wouldn't disappear, these visions of these snakes. And Nancy says, the serpent is a very powerful being. You should respect it. And I'm like, dog, did you hear what she said? Like, she didn't say she was stepping on snakes. She said, I was hallucinating things. That's not at all what she said. And it says so very much about Nancy's state of mind and how she is not even fucking listening to a goddamn word anybody is saying, because all she is really picturing is her power. Nancy kind of dismisses her and says, all right, are we going to do this? And they all stand up and they begin to call the corners. Nancy says, Hail to the guardians of the watchtowers of the east, powers of air and invention, hear us. And they all, like one by one, south fire and feeling, west water and intuition, they all by one call their corners. And we get some extremely sexual innuendos from Nancy once more. And then she gets struck by lightning as she's shouting, Minot, fill me. And then we cut to black. We wake up the next day. The girls are waking up on the beach and they look over and they see Nancy walking on water. And this is, honestly, in my opinion, this is the creepiest moment of the film. And as she's walking up, we hear some kind of screams from a side, and they look over and there are all of these sharks that are dead on the waterline. And Nancy gets extremely excited and says,
This is a gift. These are my gifts.
I think we figured out that Manon's love language is gifts.
he's a terrible gift giver. You don't want him as your secret Santa. This is the worst scene ever. I hate this. So then the next scene, they are driving in her red convertible.
Hot.
Once again, they're going to run out of money. You know what? Living in Los Angeles, they're living in a high rise and she's a brand new red convertible. Those gals are going to be out of money really quick. But they are riding in her red convertible, and Nancy is just drunk with power. And it is so clear that Sarah is freaked out. She's like, you know what, girls, like, let's take a step back. Sharks are dying. Things are not going the way that they wanted them to go. So she does not succeed in convincing them to give up their power. They're runaway train, and she is obviously the only grounded person here, which is so ironic because she is Earth and she's the only grounded person in this party. So the next scene, they're back in the locker room and Rochelle comes upon Laura Lizzie, who is like full on Ben Franklin at this point. Like, her hair is fucking gone. It is like literally bald on top, hair around the edges. Like, it is gone. She's in a bad spot. And you can tell Rochelle feels badly.
Mm-hmm.
But you know what? I do think punishment fits the crime. And that very rarely happens in movies like this. It's like a Carrie moment.
I mean, she does say, what did I do to deserve this? As she's pulling out her hair, when clearly we're like,
girl, so many
you
things.
Kidding? You
did
kidding me?
so many things.
Come on.
And then we cut to a scene where Sarah's on her balcony and she's on the phone with Chris and he is begging her to go out with him. So she agrees and they go out together, and the next scene is them like literally driving in the middle of nowhere and then parked talking in the middle of nowhere. And she's kind of trying to confide in him and he's clearly not really listening to her. So she says, aren't we supposed to go to a restaurant? And he slowly says, no. And I'm like, girl, run. This ain't good. And she says, I think you should take me home. And he responds with, let me give you a back rub. And she immediately is like, you know what? No. She gets out of the car to try to walk home, and he runs after her.
She runs up the hill and trips.
Yeah, and he takes advantage of that, and he jumps on top of her and tries to rape her. She knees him in the balls and runs away, and she runs through the woods to Rochelle's house. She knocks on the door. Rochelle opens the door and is like, Sarah, what's wrong? And they take her in, and all of the girls at this point, I guess, come to Rochelle's house to comfort Sarah and talk about what happened. And to her credit, Nancy is incredible in this scene. Like, she is just like positively lethal like hearing about what Chris did to her, and she just looks like Mama Bear. I also do think it's important to note that her hair. So throughout the entire movie, her hair is in like this like slicked back little baby bun. And after she has taken in the power of Menon, she is a different human being. And her hair, like she looks like Medusa in this scene. Like it is just like chaos. It's unbelievable. And so she's taking in what Sarah is telling her. And she asks where Chris is. And Rochelle is the one that's like, well, I think he's probably at Trey's party. But Sarah's like, no, like, please, I don't want you to mess with him. I don't want to deal with this at all. Like, let's just leave it alone. And Nancy's like, mm-mm. And she walks out the door with this like unbelievable look in her eye. So Nancy goes to the party. And as soon as she walks in, Chris notices her, immediately runs up to her and is like, is Sarah here? And she beckons him upstairs. And so they go into this bedroom. Chris immediately lays on the bed, like I guess he's tired. And Nancy immediately crawls on top of him, is kind of trying to seduce him. We don't really know what her end game is here. But she's on top of him and she's talking about what a good time they used to have together. And don't you remember? And he pushes her off of him and is like, ew, you're gross. And she starts kind of like crying and she's like, oh God. And I actually do think that is sincere. Like, I think he actually probably fucking did hurt her feelings big time. And I don't blame her. I hate this guy so much in this movie. He's such a piece of shit. He's awful. You can tell, like, you do think she is affected. And then something comes over her and she I guess, realizes the power that she has. And she does this and she turns herself into Sarah with a glamour. And she, like, laughs. It's like, haha, it's me. And she crawls on top of Chris and is like, make love to me. And in the midst of this, a taxi rolls up to the party filled with Sarah, Bonnie, and Rochelle. They walk in and they run into immediately Laura Lizzie. She's in a terrible wig.
This is the Laura Lizzie wig. Disheveled.
It's awful. It's awful. If you put it like a little flip at the end of it, it would be like identical. It's a very bad wig. It's like a very Brady wig.
A very Brady wig, and like a weird chopped bang with like a poof.
Laura Lizzie pulls Rochelle aside, says, hey, listen, we assume she apologizes, but we don't really know. And then Sarah, somehow, knows the right room to walk into, and she walks into the room where Nancy and Chris are. And she walks in on them, and, you know, Chris is making out with Nancy, and he looks over, and he sees Sarah, and he thinks he's making out with Sarah. So he looks over at her, and he's, like, fucking freaks out. And he jumps off the bed and looks at Nancy and is like, you're a witch. And she's kind of like laying back on the bed. She's like, woo. And he's kind of trying to decipher what's happening. Nancy says, like, she's a witch too. That's how she got you to fall in love with her. Like, don't you know it? And then Chris says, you're just jealous. And Nancy says, jealous? Jealous? You don't even exist to me. You are nothing. You are shit. And she gets up off the bed, like fucking monster size. And he kind of like scurries away. She kind of like raises up off the ground just to her tippy toes, just so her like tiptoes are dragging on the floor, just her boots, which is very spooky. She says, the only way you know how to treat women is as whores. when you're the whore. And Chris says, I'm sorry. Which, like, buddy, read the room. That ain't gonna do nothing. I'm not gonna do nothing.
No, too late.
So he says, I'm sorry. And she says, yo, he's sorry. She starts like shaking her head. And and the doors to the window open. And he is like pushed out. And he falls off the roof.
He hits
It's
the
a
concrete.
very iconic moment. And I do just think Chris should have realized that I'm sorry in that moment was not going to cut the salami. And it didn't. It didn't work out for him. Nancy didn't care. And there he goes. He's out the window. It's done. He's gone.
He's gone.
And
Deceased.
bye.
Just like this.
And we don't really miss him. He was a piece of duty. I hated that guy. He was the worst character. And it was so upsetting because I love Skeet Ulrich so much. So very much. He means so much to me. I'm going to marry him one day. Manifesting it with my candles. Sarah's very upset. The next scene, she is like in her bed. She's crying about it. Her dad is trying to console her. She's like, don't touch me. Everything I touch turns to shit. Don't touch me. She also says, I didn't want him to get hurt. I liked him. I think he was a good guy underneath it all.
Girl. Girl, you said he was a nice guy?
He was not a good guy. He was not a good guy.
Kiki.
He wasn't a good guy. He was awful. The next scene, she's obviously very upset about what happened, and she is afraid of Nancy and what Nancy is capable of. So the next scene, she has a picture of the four of them, and she is cutting Nancy out of it and doing a binding spell. I bind you, Nancy, from doing harm to yourself and harm to others. Next day at school, like she's clearly in a very disgruntled mindset, and she goes into the bathroom at school and locks herself in the stall and just needs a minute, and they pop open that door, and Nancy's hair is just like full on Medusa at this moment. Like she is not okay. They ask her why she wants to leave the circle, and she says, like, people are dying. It's just getting really scary. And Nancy says, they deserved it. And Sarah says, okay, look, I'm out. Like, I'm done with this. I don't want to be a part of it anymore. And Nancy says, well, fine. You know, we don't need a fourth, right, girls? Like, too many. And they're all like, yeah, we don't need it. And I'm like, y'all would be nothing without Sarah. She's the only one with actual natural witch abilities. Y'all would be fucking shit without Sarah. It's very bothersome to me how much they think they would matter without her. They would mean nothing without her. They will learn. They will learn. And they tell her that she should really think about leaving the school or the city or maybe even the planet. They don't know. Nancy says in the old days, when a witch would think about leaving her coven, they would kill her. So then Nancy kind of like comically is like, bye. And she leaves the bathroom. So Sarah runs home. And as soon as she enters the house, she's calling for her dad. She's calling for her mom. Nobody's there. There's a phone call. She picks up. Who is it? Old pal Nancy, who says, they're gone. They thought you ran away. They thought you ran away to San Francisco, so they caught a flight, and the flight crashed. Turn on the news. So she turns on the TV and there's, this whole news story about this flight crashing from San Francisco and this whole thing. And Sarah is sobbing. She's so upset. She runs outside and sees just snakes fucking everywhere. Tarantulas, rats, maggots, just fucking all down the stairs, just thousands of them. She runs upstairs to get away from them, and it's actually much fucking worse upstairs.
They used like 1,000 snakes and bugs and shit.
All real. And it's crazy is like the scene. So she runs into the bathroom and they drop real rats on top of her head. And she was just a real trooper about it. She is freaking, I mean, like,
But this
it
is
is
what
really
this is what she
sick.
told Nancy about her.
About what happened to her. She confided in her, and look what's happening. Scorpions are in the sink. Like, this shit is fucking everywhere. She jumps into the shower and closes her eyes, and then, poof, the shower curtain pulls back, and Nancy says, "Gotcha." Man, if I was as pathetic as you, I would have killed myself a long time ago. You should really get on that. And closes it. So Sarah climbs out of the shower and everything is gone. Ain't no maggots, ain't no rats, ain't no roaches, ain't nothing. So, she's imagining it all. She walks down the stairs, and there are her old pals. And Nancy says, "You're going to kill yourself tonight, my dear." In a very, maniacal, Simpsons way. And Sarah's like, "No, I'm not." And she's like, "Yeah, you are." And then all of a sudden they all rise. They all just levitate off the fucking floor and look down on her. She tells Sarah, "You have every reason to kill yourself. You killed your mom," which is really crazy. You killed your mom before you were even born. That's really evil. That's really crazy. And you killed Chris. And you're disgusting and you're weak. She is extremely evil in this moment, just pooping on her. Sarah starts crying and all three of them start chanting, "Now is the end. Let her go in peace. Now is the end. Let her go in peace." Which, you know what? Look here. Look. Nancy's a fuckhead. She's really mean. What about the other girls? I hate this scene because I just cannot believe that these girls, who she literally braided Laura Lizzie's hair with Rochelle's to get the revenge. You know what I mean? She was in it with these girls, and for them to do this shit is just so fucking evil. I hate that they do this to her. It's just simply wild. So they're chanting, "Now is the end, let her go in peace." And Nancy drops this suicide note that she's kind of written in Sarah's handwriting, "I killed Chris. I am guilty. I want to die." Whatever. And
She cuts Chris.
yeah, and she slits her wrists open and is like, "You're gonna die tonight." And Sarah is like, "Ah!" And she runs back up the stairs and she's trying to come up with a game plan. She's like, "I'm not fucking doing this. I gotta think of something." Then they cut back to the girls downstairs and Nancy says, "Rochelle, Bonnie, go upstairs and check on her. See if she's killed herself yet. Go look on her." And so they go upstairs, and as they're going upstairs, they cut back to Sarah, who is chanting, "By the powers of three, make them see, make them see, make them see." They're walking up the stairs, and they pass a mirror. And as they pass the mirror, they look into it, and Rochelle's hair is almost all gone. And Bonnie is half ridden with burns, a million times worse than it was before. And they're looking, and they're like, "Oh my God." And they scream and they run down the stairs. And my question here is why didn't they just look at each other and oh, it's just an illusion? Like, why didn't they, like, assure each other that it was nothing? Like, they just look in this mirror and then they run away. And I'm like, why didn't you guys, you know? So they look in this mirror. They see these terrible things. They run out of the house, freaked out. And Nancy's like, where are you going? But off they go. They don't answer her. So Nancy's like, all right, I guess I have to check on this ship by myself. So Nancy goes up to look for Sarah. And by this point, Sarah's full of the power. She has invoked Manon. She's looking for her. She's looking for her. And Sarah is inside of the mirror at this point. And she comes out and like pokes on Nancy's shoulder, which is such a baller move. And she tells Nancy that Manon is pissed because she has abused his power and it's too much and he wants revenge and he's not okay with it. And as she's telling her these things, roaches start coming out of Nancy's clothes, coming down through her hands and coming out through her boots, and like roaches are covering her. And she looks down and her fingers are snakes. And she freaks out and she falls to the ground and she's just like having like an episode. Like roaches are coming out of her mouth. Like it is like a really dark scene. And then all of a sudden they stop. And Sarah says, relax. It's only magic. Nancy kind of stands up and she's like, look, I know I'm crazy. It's just like things got out of hand, you know? Oops. Like, you try to make her think her parents were dead. Things are a little bit more than a little out of hand. But regardless, she tries to play that card. And Sarah doesn't really say anything back, but she just starts doing a spell on her. She's like, I bind you, Nancy. I bind you from doing harm to others and harm to yourself. I bind you, Nancy. And Nancy does not like that. And she's like, ah! And so she pulls a dagger out of nowhere and goes to jump on her. She pushes her against the wall. And before she can really do any harm, Dresser comes and goes to pin Sarah. And it looks like it pins Sarah. And
It's a wild scene. There's like a
yeah, and
tornado
Nancy
of
has like
debris.
jumped out of the way. And so Nancy sees this dresser that looks like it's pinned Sarah. She pushes the dresser out of the way and she sees only, she, moves stuff out of the way and she sees only Sarah's clothes. And so she's like, tricky, tricky. But she knows Sarah's a good witch. So she goes to try to stab the clothes. Sarah appears and fucking kicks her into oblivion, into the wild, wild west. We never really know. She kicks her into a bad place. And then we cut to sometime later. We don't know. And Sarah's in her driveway. Rochelle and Bonnie come to visit her. And Bonnie is wearing the most atrocious clothes. These striped silk jammies. I don't know what to call them. They are very bad. And they're like, sorry about what happened. Things got out of hand. And, that whole thing about your parents, that was a joke. Hee hee. Our bad. Also, we've lost our powers. Do you still have your powers? Because, we don't have ours. So if you ever want to get together and call the corners and chant, and Sarah says, maybe, why don't you hold your breath until I call? And as they walk away, they're like, she probably doesn't have any powers anyway. And then she does her thing. And the clouds shift and some lightning strikes and a tree branch falls right in front of them and they fall down. And they look back at her and they realize she has the power. Then she says, be careful. You don't want to end up like Nancy. And then they cut to Nancy, who's in a fucking mental institute, like in bed, like literally tied down, like, I'm flying, I'm only flying. Like she's in a really crazy kooky state, and they kind of
Great act.
close in on her face, like, I'm flying. And then it just cuts to the credits. And that's the end. So here at Stoli Doli Scaries, we rate our movies based on how many Stoli Dolis it would take you to enjoy the film. And for me, I give The Craft 0 because I could enjoy this movie with 0 drinks. I think it's perfect. I think it's witchy. I think it's cool. I think it's scary. I just think it's the best 90s flick, and it's perfect.
Well, I agree with you on some of those things. I do believe that it is an iconic movie. It is a wonderful cast. It's really, really good acting. I thoroughly enjoyed it all the way through. I'm terrified of all things witchy now, and I've got things to prove it. But I will give this film 1 Stoli-Doli. And the reason why is really it comes down to the effects. That guy getting run over and some of the other things, I was just like, we could do better. They made up for it a little bit in the end with all of the, creatures and the snakes and all that stuff was wild. And I was like, why couldn't we just uphold that standard? So for that reason, I will give it 1 Stoli-Doli.
That's fair. That's a fair rating. I do not agree, but you're right. They went all out with them snakes, and I don't know why. they missed the mark so much on other moments, but can't win them all.
Can't win them all.
Well, thank you guys so much for joining us. We love talking to you. If you enjoy our videos and our audio, if you enjoy your audio, if you enjoy our podcast, please subscribe. It really makes us feel nice. And
leave a comment.
leave a comment.
A good one.
We look forward to talking to you next time.
So until then, I would say don't invoke Manon.